This podcast discusses child sexual abuse and the impacts of harm on children and families. While we won't include graphic detail, some listeners may find this content distressing. Please take care while listening and consider pausing or seeking support if you need to. There's many and varied support services available, including Lifeline on 13 11 14, Kids Helpline for 5 to 25-year-olds on 1800 55 1800, and the Sexual Assault Helpline on 1800 010 120. If you're outside of Australia, we encourage you to seek a local support service. Well, welcome to the podcast, Amelia. I'm really pleased to have you here. The perspectives of young people are critical to reform in any area, which is why I'm really pleased to have you on the show to share your perspectives with me today.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So let's get into it. Why do you think it's important that children and young people are involved in conversations about safeguarding?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, a young person or a child is going to want to know how they are being spoken to. They're going to want to know how they best learn, how they best take in information, and who best to inform than the young person themselves.
Do you think it's an area for development for us? Do you think we still have a long way to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a lot of areas, young people are overlooked because of their age. And I think especially when we're looking at issues that directly affect young people, we should be consulting the young people on how best they're going to take in information, how best they're going to disclose information. I think it's definitely something that young people should be more involved in, how these conversations are being brought up.
What sorts of things should people think about when they are speaking to children and young people? You're just talking about they need a different way, or they know what's right for them. What sorts of things should people be thinking about?
Yeah, well, I think especially when it comes to younger people, they don't really know what age group. I know for me, when I was younger, a lot of people wanted to baby me. They wanted to speak to me like I was a child. And although I did want to be spoken to more like an adult. I think for a long time I thought I was a bit older than what I was. But yeah, I think each child's different, each personality is different, and I think it's really about getting to know that child, their best communication style, especially when we're talking about things like autism and also neurodivergent children. It does require different communication, and it's really up to the individual and building that relationship between the two to best get results.
Part E of the report focuses on prevention. That's stopping harm before it occurs. What do you think systems most often misunderstand about what prevention really means for children and young people?
I think in the eyes of the system, prevention is very much about stopping that particular perpetrator, but prevention can start in education. Prevention really is all about education. It can be preventing a child on certain behaviours. For example, it could be educating a child on what grooming looks like. That can then prevent a situation from occurring or prevent a situation from escalating. They can go, hang on, that sounds very much what's happening to me, sounds very much like what's going on with my little sister, and things like that. And I think it's also about educating community members, educating parents on how to identify certain, alarming behaviours early on. I think it's all about prevention from the start, whether that be victims, community, or perpetrators themselves.
The report talks about early warning signs being missed or not acted on. It's a theme right through the report and feeds into the recommendations. What should professionals do differently, do you think, when a child is trying to signal that something's not right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know in my situation, as a child, I was very outgoing. I was very bubbly. To many, I sort of seemed like just your happy, ordinary kid. However, if you really sort of focused on what was going on behind closed doors, focused on certain behaviors that I had, I was very much, I was full of anxiety. I had a lot of OCD behaviors, particularly around germs and fear of small spaces. It can seem something very minor. However, for me, my trauma and the abuse was manifesting in alternative ways, that being phobias and so on and so forth. I think the system, I think it's very stereotypical for people to pinpoint the kid that draws attention to themselves, the kid that's naughty or the kid that's acting out. However, that's not always the case. It can be the happy, outgoing kid. It can be the shy, quiet kid. I don't think there's always what a stereotypical victim looks like, especially when it comes to young people. It is really about getting to know all those behaviours and all those warning signs that one size certainly doesn't fit all when it comes to sort of the warning signs of abuse.
And I guess that's really speaking to what you had just mentioned before about a tailored approach to an individual child, getting to know that child, getting to know their personality and understanding when behaviours may change or when something doesn't necessarily seem right.
Yeah, absolutely.
The report makes it clear that keeping children safe is a shared responsibility across families, communities, and indeed systems. Where do adults most often step back instead of stepping up? And what difference would it make if responsibility was truly shared?
I think in terms of removing that stigma, I think oftentimes adults don't quite know how to approach the situation. They don't know how to talk to the young person. They don't know what's right to say, what's wrong to say. And at the end of the day, that comes down to educating yourself. It comes down to stepping up as a member of the community, whether you're directly a parent and a child educator, or whether you're just a member of the community. I think especially when it comes to sexual abuse, there is quite a stigma around that. It's quite a taboo topic. A lot of older people and adults find that quite uncomfortable to talk about. And I think it's really about breaking down that stigma. At the end of the day, no survivor should be made to feel guilty. No survivor should be made to feel that they're making someone uncomfortable for disclosing that abuse.
It's a really big question and you may not have the answer, but how do we break that stigma?
I think the most important thing is education. I think we need to be bringing awareness to it. I think we need to be talking about it, because at the end of the day, continuing to tread around the topic isn't going to break down any barriers. I think it's about hearing survivors speaking up if they feel comfortable, if they have the platform to do so, and listening and really taking what they have to say and listening to those bits of advice. The best way to hear how a survivor wants to be spoken to is to hear directly from a survivor.
You've been a strong advocate for young people's voices to be taken seriously. You participated in the 2025 Youth Summit hosted by Queensland Family and Child Commission. Thank you. You were amazing. How do spaces like the Youth Summit contribute to providing a safer Queensland for children?
Well, I think it's really eye-opening. One, it's empowering as a young person to speak at an event that is full of other young people who are so passionate and so empowering and just so driven. It's also empowering as a survivor to hear other survivors speak on similar topics, talk about their own experience, really makes you feel that you're not alone. And I do think that awareness is very important, especially for those who may just be beginning their healing journey. And I think it's also especially empowering to hear about all the other issues that affect young people. Quite often we might only know about the issues that directly affect us. So to hear about the large range of issues and all the different areas that young people are being affected, it's really inspiring to hear people's stories, to hear that courage to speak up. And also it's great to hear about the different areas where I as an individual can help out more. Areas in which don't directly affect me and how small changes in my life can help other people.
Well, thank you so much for participating in the Youth Summit. Your speech was fantastic, and if our listeners are interested, there's your video and many others that are there for people to have a look and hear some of the views of other young people in Queensland. Our final question is around the recommendations of the report. So in plain sight recommends that governments really must fund support for people affected by child sexual abuse. How do you think that should look?
A big part of my advocacy is about mental health support. So specifically, I talk about the effects of trauma. So oftentimes with survivors, they go through long periods of time throughout their life where they feel fine. From the outside, they seem very happy. Their trauma doesn't affect them as such. However, healing really is nonlinear. Oftentimes repressed trauma comes up, or trauma starts to manifest in terms of disorders and different mental health issues. So it is really important that those resources be available, because the financial burden that these resources have on survivors are huge. And quite often survivors who are particularly dealing with domestic abuse or abuse within the home or within the family, it comes with a financial strain. They may have to, flee their home out of safety. It may come down to a one-parent home. So quite often the survivors aren't able to fund their own mental health journey. Quite often the ones who need it the most aren't the ones who are able to access it. And I think in the long run, it really, in terms of economic benefit for the government, they're going to have to invest a lot less in homelessness, in drug use, so on and so forth, because these survivors will be able to get that help early on and have access to those resources, rather than not being able to access it due to safety, due to financial situations, or even due to location. Survivors who are located rurally really struggle to get access to that. A lot of substance abuse issues and homelessness and a large range of issues would be minimised long term if survivors are able to get that intervention early on.
What you've really described there is, or you've articulated, the impact of abuse can be so far reaching right across communities. It's far beyond the individual. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and for your contribution to the review. It really is appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That concludes episode 5 of In Plain Sight. This episode reminds us that prevention is not abstract, it is practical, human, and urgent. In our next episode, we'll look forward to reform, accountability, and how Queensland can embed these lessons to safeguard the future. I hope you tune in.